The attorney Brian Stevenson is famous for saying that each of us is more than the worst thing we have done. Each of us is more than the worst thing that we have done. We are complex creatures. Every year, we grow, we change, we become different from who we are, and that compounds all the more so over a lifetime. We are more than the worst thing we have done. For me, I think the power of the quote comes from its aspiration. It might be true, and it ought to be true, but that's usually not how things play out. We are tied to our most extreme actions, the good and the bad, no matter whether those outlying events have any relevance to the majority of our time on this planet. Thinking about what could be on the bad, a single arrest, a single mugshot, no matter the reason, no matter the growth that has occurred since then, that one image, that will come up on Google searches for years, decades, possibly lifetimes. Each of us is better than the worst thing we have done. An aspiration. It might be true. It's not usually how things play out. This week we are in the book of Numbers, Parshat Chukat. Wandering through the wilderness, the Israelites find themselves thirsting for water. They call out to Moses, desperate that Moses does something. Moses and his brother Aaron go to God, and God gives instructions. Take the rod, assemble the community, and before their eyes order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them. And Moses took the rod from before Adonai, as God had commanded him. Moses and Aaron, they assembled the congregation in front of the rock. Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" And Moses raised his hand, and he struck the rock twice with his rod. And out came copious water, and the community and their animals drank. But Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them. Because you did not trust God enough to affirm God's sanctity, you will both die in this desert." For those who are not familiar with the story, you are forgiven if you're a little confused. If you're wondering, what exactly did Moses and Aaron do wrong here? Or whatever it was, why was it such a big deal? If you're asking those questions, no, you are in very good company. Our tradition has tried to provide answers for centuries, and there have been a lot of attempts. Now, normally in a virtual Shabbat, I would explain what those attempts are, but here we have an opportunity to make this interactive. So I would like to call on you, for people that may know or may have thoughts here, on what you think it was, whether you have studied this. There we go, turned off a little too quick. Whether you've studied this before or just hearing it now, you think you have an idea. Things you think or things you have heard before. What was it that Moses did that was so bad when he strikes this rock that it causes God to say, you don't get to go to the promised land anymore, you will die among the rocks in this desert? So, does anyone have any suggestions they want to add? I'll come to you. Give me just a moment. Okay, Wendy in the back, hold on.
He showed anger. It wasn't. God told him to raise his what do you call it? His rod, and rather than just raise it, number one, he struck the rock, which he wasn't told to do, and he was angry in doing it, which he wasn't told to do.
Thank you, Wendy. So number one, that he was angry. He showed anger. It was a violent act. He was saying, you're supposed to talk to the rock, and Moses hits it out of some kind of rage or anger or frustration. Other theories, what did Moses do that was so terrible? Russell.
I don't think he did anything that was that bad. I think it was something that had to happen because he was not the proper leader to lead them into the promised land, and that was just an excuse for it to happen.
We can all thank Russell because he has just eliminated the final paragraph of my sermon. Thank you, Russell. All right. You can go up there and give it if you want. All right, other thoughts? Not that I'm saying that's the answer, but that is a very insightful point. I say that because it was the point I made, yes. Okay, other thoughts? What might it have been? Last chance. Okay, well, thank you to the two. I will go back up here. And I mean, the human ears are very versatile, but they're doing triple duty right now, and the headpiece, the glasses, the eye mask. Okay, there we go. Okay, so looking at my notes here, and we covered at least two of them. Number one is angry. Maimonides suggests he's angry in multiple ways, so thank you, Wendy, for that. Another, Nachmanides says he was arrogant, that he said we, as in Moses and Aaron, we're going to bring water, not God is going to bring water. So he was taking credit for something. Another, Ibn Ezra says that when the people cried out, we want water, instead of answering them, they both kind of lurk back to talk to God and say, God, we don't know what to do. And so that kind of weakness was the sin, according to Ibn Ezra. Midrash says he struck the rock instead of spoke to it. So that's the most famous explanation. Also, a Midrash says, well, it's not clear, so other stuff must have happened here. The people were probably laughing at Moses and making fun of him, and instead of Moses keeping his cool, that's what leads him to lash out. So a little different there. And the last one that I'll share, Rabbi Levi Isaac says that Moses humiliated and he shamed the Israelites because he says, listen, rebels. And to him, to Rabbi Isaac, that this is shaming them. It's calling them a bad name to try to make them feel bad because Moses is angry at them. And when we're angry, sometimes we want to make the people who have made us angry feel bad. So where does this leave us, all of these explanations? For those of you who were confused a few minutes ago about what the sin was, I'm guessing you still might be. Even the classic example of hitting rather than asking, it doesn't really satisfy. Rocks, even magic rocks, they don't feel pain. They don't get upset. They're rocks. And sure, he didn't follow directions, but the punishment does seem a bit harsh. Moses and Aaron, they clearly did something wrong, and something that was really wrong. Something that was wrong enough to warrant keeping them away from fulfilling their purpose in life. And this is where you might be tempted to say, well, you've got two Jews, three opinions, so maybe that's just it. But there's something more, I think, that's worth sharing to try to answer this puzzle, this mystery of what was the reason. Here we have an unclear offense and multiple theories. The commentator Lazzato warns us that Moses, our teacher, he committed one sin. He did one thing that was wrong, but in the commentator's words, other commentators have heaped on him 13 more, each commentator adding a new sin. Lazzato, he goes on to say that he is staying out of this whole debate. Like, I could come up with something bad he might have done, but he says, I'm not going to because I don't want to give Moses his 14th sin. I find that comment a bit funny, but I think there's a seriousness to it. At some point, this exercise of theorizing what Moses did wrong, at some point this turns into defamation. And there's actually a tradition that Moses and Aaron's sin was deleted from the text. So actually there was something listed there, but at some point it was taken out in order to not disgrace their legacy and their honor. It's had the opposite effect. Yet, we now have suggestions that Moses was arrogant, or he was weak-willed, he was disobedient, he was angry, or he was cruel. Perhaps he was one of those things, or perhaps he was none of those things and guilty of something else entirely. But he certainly wasn't all of those things. And yet, through this thought exercise that has been going on in our tradition for centuries, in our minds, that is kind of what we're left with. All of these bad things he might have done. So I suggest we reframe this entire experiment and we try to take Moses out of it. It's not really about Moses, it's about God and it's about us. This is what I mean. The commentators in their theorizing, they aren't really trying to figure out what Moses did. They are trying to figure out what could an otherwise good and decent human being do that would be so unforgivable that it would warrant this punishment from God. When Maimonides says Moses' sin was losing his temper publicly, what he's really saying is that he believes losing one's temper publicly as a leader, lashing out at the people who follow you and trust you, that is the very worst thing you could do. And when Nachmanides says that his sin was saying that we are going to get water instead of God is going to get water, Nachmanides is saying that claiming power that you do not have, that is the greatest sin you can do, and so on. So, we too, we can play the role of commentator and speculate about which offense would be worse. Or we can do something else. Russell, this is where you come in. I want to wrap up by offering a final theory of the flaw. This one comes courtesy of Rabbi Dr. Gunther Plaut. And he starts by reminding us of the context. This is toward the very end of the 40 years of wandering. The Israelites, they have complained the whole way, and they've even said that they wish that they were still slaves in Egypt. But here, these are all people who were born in freedom in the desert. That other generation had died off. But these, in front of Moses at this time, these are people who never even knew slavery. And there they are looking at their leader saying they would prefer it to anything Moses has to offer. As Rabbi Plaut notes, in previous times the brothers took action in these instances and they responded. But here they turned their backs and they silently walked away. To which I would say, can you blame them? A lifetime dedicated to leading a people who continue to say, thanks for nothing. Maybe there never was a sin, as Russell suggested. Maybe Moses and Aaron had given all they could possibly give, all anyone could possibly give in such a situation. They were leaders of a previous generation who could not lead any further. They were to die in the desert not as a punishment, not because they did anything wrong, but because a new generation needed new leaders. It is a minority view, but it is worth considering. Maybe we are having so much trouble identifying the sin because there never was one in the first place. And here we are tisk-tisking Moses about hitting rocks. We are all more than the worst thing we have done. Whatever it was, if it was anything at all, it must have been the worst thing Moses did. But still, it did not define him. It should not be his legacy. It should not be one of the top 3 things anyone can think of when you ask them, what do you know about Moses? If we are looking for flaws in others, we will find them. And that is not to say we shouldn't have a critical view of other people or of ourselves or of the world. We should. But there has to be a balance. Of course Moses has flaws as a human being, and of course we should acknowledge and learn from them. But to allow the greatest leader in Jewish history to be defined by his flaw, whatever it was, or as Lozato says, a dozen invented flaws, it's a mistake and a disservice to a character that more than any other shaped the trajectory of the Jewish story. Instead of focusing on that, on what might have been bad about Moses, let us refocus on the qualities that this man exemplified: humility, patience, trust, vision. These were the qualities that led a young man, humble of speech, to realize that he had a voice. His voice was powerful. His voice could and would change the world. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.